Sophie is 58 years old. She has worked for 32 years. She has never missed a mortgage payment. She has done everything right, or at least everything she was told to do. And she is going to retire with $247,000 less than her husband. Not because she earned less, not entirely, not because she spent more, but because of 3 structural traps that the Australian financial system built into her life before she even started. And no one told her they existed. This video is about those 3 traps, and if you are between 25 and 38 right now, you still have time to step around them. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the gender retirement gap in Australia is not primarily a pay gap problem. Even though that is what every headline tells you, you will know the 3 actual drivers, and you will have 4 concrete actions to take before your next financial decision. This is not a video about closing the pay gap. You cannot do that alone, and frankly, you shouldn't have to. This is a video about what you can control, and what the system is quietly counting on you not to know. The Australian superannuation gender gap is not new data. The Workplace Gender Equality Agency has been reporting it for years. The average Australian woman retires with around 25% less super than the average Australian man. 25%. That is not a rounding error. That is not explained by spending habits or financial literacy. It is structural, and it has 3 specific causes. Let's go through them. Here is something almost no one says out loud. Superannuation, as a system, was designed around a continuous, full-time, 40-year working life. It assumes you start at 22, contribute without interruption, and retire at 67. That is not most women's working life. Back to Sophie. Sophie took 14 months off when her first child was born and 8 months off for her second. She worked part-time, 3 days a week, for 6 years while her children were in primary school. She came back to full-time work at 41. During those years, 2 things happened that Sophie did not fully understand at the time. First, she stopped receiving super contributions for the period she was not being paid. In Australia, your employer is only required to pay super on the salary they pay you. No salary, no super. From July 2025, the government does now pay a 12% super contribution on government parental leave payments. And if that applies to you, it is worth knowing those payments land after the end of the financial year, in July 2026, not during your leave. But employer-paid leave schemes are a different story. Many do not include super contributions, and most employers do not top them up voluntarily. And none of this touches the years Sophie worked part-time, 3 days a week for 6 years, where contributions simply ran at a fraction of what they would have been. Second, and this is the one that quietly destroys the number, compounding stopped working for her. Here's the maths. If Sophie had $100,000 in super at 32 and contributed nothing for 2 years, she does not just miss 2 years of contributions. She misses 2 years of compounding on everything already in there. At 7% annual growth, that is roughly $15,000 in foregone growth, on top of the contributions she did not make, on top of the employer contributions she did not receive. And then she went part-time contributions on part-time salary for 6 years. The compounding gap widens every single year she is out or reduced, and it never fully closes because the money that was not there at 32 is not there to compound at 42 or 52 or 62. This is not Sophie's fault. This is arithmetic meeting a system that was not built for her life. If you are on parental leave right now or planning to take it, check whether your employer pays super during leave. Some do, it is becoming more common, and some enterprise agreements require it. If yours does not, and you have capacity, you can make voluntary contributions during that period yourself. Even small ones matter more at 30 than they will at 50. If you are working part-time, salary sacrifice is your friend. Pre-tax contributions reduce your taxable income and boost your super simultaneously. Most people do not start doing this until their 40s. Starting in your 30s, even at $50 a fortnight, makes a material difference over 25 years. The super gap is real, but it is actually the smallest of the 3 structural problems. The second structural trap is the way Australian banks treat income interruption. And most women only discover it when it is already too late to do anything about it. It usually starts with a decision that sounds completely sensible. Buy property first, Sort the rest of the finances later. Property is an asset. It builds wealth. Get the foundation right and everything else follows. Here is why that timing is quietly devastating for women specifically. The average age of a first home buyer in Australia right now is around 36. The average Australian woman has her first child at around 30, which means that for a significant proportion of women, the peak borrowing capacity window, the years when your income is highest relative to your debt, overlaps almost exactly with the period when your income is about to be interrupted. Sophie bought her home at 33. She and her husband were assessed on 2 full-time incomes. The bank approved them for a loan that assumed both incomes would remain stable. 8 months later, Sophie was on parental leave. Her income dropped by roughly 60% for 14 months. What Sophie did not know, and what almost no mortgage broker will tell you unprompted, is that Australian banks use income averaging. They assess your borrowing capacity not on what you earn now, but on what you earned across the last 12 to 24 months. If that window includes parental leave, your capacity on paper is significantly lower than your actual salary. Sophie found this out when she and her husband tried to refinance at 36, 2 years after her return to work. They were knocked back at the first lender, not because they couldn't afford the prepayments, because the bank's model flagged income inconsistency. That is a structural feature of Australian lending, not a bug. And it disproportionately affects women because women take the majority of parental leave in Australia. Currently, around 82% of primary carers are women. If you are already in a property and thinking about refinancing, the income averaging window applies here too. Time your application to a point where your last 12 payslips tell a clean, consistent story. And that brings us to the third structural problem, which is the one with the biggest lever. Sophie is good with money. She is not a spendthrift. She has an offset account. She has a savings account. She puts money away every month. But Sophie does not have a financial architecture. She has a collection of accounts that she manages reactively. Here is what I mean by architecture: a deliberate system where every dollar has a role, not just saved or spent, but positioned. Growth assets working over a long time horizon, a buffer that protects the growth assets from being liquidated at the wrong moment. Tax structures that do not leak money quietly every year. The reason this is a gendered problem is not because women are worse at building this. It is because women are statistically less likely to have been taught to build it, and more likely to have been handed a savings account and told that was enough. Research consistently shows that women in Australia are more likely to hold their wealth in cash and property, and less likely to hold it in shares or investment portfolios. Cash feels safe. Cash is also, at current inflation rates, losing real value every year it sits still. The compounding gap that started with Sophie's parental leave is made significantly worse if the money she does have outside super is sitting in a savings account earning 3.5% while inflation runs at 3.2%. She is essentially running to stand still. The architecture question is not, should I invest? It is, do you have a system where your money is working in layers? Short-term buffer, medium-term flexibility, long-term growth. And are those layers sized correctly for your actual life stage? Most women Sophie's age do not. Not because they cannot, because no one sat down with them at 32 and explained that the offset account and the savings account are not a strategy. They are tools, and tools without a blueprint build nothing. And here is what makes this worse. The system has actually built free money into it for women in exactly Sophie's position, and almost no one claims it. If you earn under approximately $47,500 in a financial year, which includes any year you are working part-time, on reduced hours, or returning from parental leave, and you make a voluntary contribution of $1,000 into your super, the federal government will deposit an additional $500 directly into your super account. Every single year you qualify. That is the Super Co-contribution scheme. It requires no application. When you lodge your tax return, the ATO calculates it automatically. $1,000 in, $500 added on top. Every year your income falls below that threshold. There is a second one. If you earn $37,000 or less in a financial year, the ATO will actually refund the 15% tax your employer already paid on your super contributions, up to $500 per year. straight back into your super account. That is the low income super tax offset. Again, automatic. Again, no application required. Again, almost entirely unknown by the women it was designed for. These are not obscure loopholes. They are federal government schemes that exist specifically because the super system disadvantages lower income earners. They just never got the marketing budget. And then there is this. There is currently approximately $21.5 billion sitting in lost super accounts across Australia. That is money contributed by employers, grown over years, sitting unclaimed because someone changed jobs, changed their name, moved address, or simply lost track. Some of it is almost certainly yours. You can find it in under 5 minutes through your MyGov account linked to the ATO. It will show you every super fund ever opened in your name. If you have never checked, check tonight. So, 3 structural traps. A super system built around a working life most women do not have. A property and lending system that punishes income interruption, and a financial architecture gap that turns good saving habits into stagnant wealth. Sophie is not a cautionary tale. Sophie is most Australian women, competent, responsible, and working inside a system that was not designed with her in mind. The 4 things I want you to do tonight. 1. Open your Superfund app and find your projected balance at 67. Write it down. 2. Check your MyGov account for lost super. Takes 5 minutes. $21.5 billion is sitting there unclaimed, and some of it may be yours. 3. Check whether you qualify for the co-contribution or the low-income super tax offset in any year your income drops. Both are automatic. Neither requires an application. Both deposit up to $500 per year directly into your super. 4. Check your binding beneficiary nomination. If you have not nominated someone, your super fund gets to decide who receives your balance when you die. Not your will, not your family, the fund. Log in tonight and fix it if it is not current. If there is a gap in any of these, and there probably is, that gap is not your fault, but it is now your information, and information is where this starts. If this resonated, subscribe. There is a lot more coming. New videos every week covering exactly this kind of thing.